We're honored to welcome serial entrepreneur and investor Justin Kan. In 2007, Justin started Justin TV, a 24/7 live video feed of his life, broadcast via a webcam attached to his head. Justin very much pioneered this idea of life casting and created the first live video platform so anyone could publish a live stream. What I've been thinking about is, can you imagine how we would be gathered here today if we didn't have tools like this? So Justin is also formerly a partner at the Silicon Valley incubator Y Combinator. He went on to co-found Twitch and Socialcam, and Justin has recently started a fund to incubate and invest in early stage startups called Goat Capital, named for a hardy animal that exemplifies the qualities of good founders. As Justin writes, goats climb up mountains and skillfully navigate through low valleys, and they're willing to eat pretty gross things to survive. So I'm sure some of you can relate. So this will be a conversation between Justin and Hua about how to survive and thrive as an entrepreneur. So Hua, please take it away.
Yes, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. And the last panel was awesome. Thanks for everyone for sharing. Justin, you have your hands in a lot of projects. You give out lots of good advice. What are some words of advice to entrepreneurs in general, and particularly those in highly regulated markets like the cannabis industry, that you could bestow on us?
First, what's up? Good to see you, man. It's nice to be
what's
here.
up?
What's my advice for entrepreneurs? I feel like it's kind of a generic question, but it's really just get out there. You got to get started. I guess I heard that a little bit in the last panel. One of the biggest barriers is kind of just getting started and kind of taking that first step. Being an entrepreneur can seem like a very daunting challenge when you haven't done anything. But for me, the key has always been with businesses. I just dive in and start researching them and talking to people and recruiting people, and then eventually something just coalesces and catalyzes and forms from it.
Yeah, I remember when we were going through YC, you weren't our partner, but you were there, and we were doing our demo day presentation, and we were talking about the evolution of Justin TV and Twitch and it being sold and all of that. And you said, survive and thrive. And that really sort of, cemented this panel for us. It was as much as you have to, win it all right away. It was, as long as you're at the end of the race and you're still standing, you're going to be fine. How do you look at building that resiliency over such a marathon pace in order to get there?
That's cannabis is a perfect example of that industry, that message, right? Because, the message that I told you guys, this was I think at the end of Y Combinator, which, was my message to All Stars, was sometimes you have to just build something and wait for everything to kind of build up around you, right? If you stay in the game long enough, you're trying things, you're growing, you're talking to customers, eventually you're going to build something of value. And so, that was our example with Twitch, where we launched this thing called Justin TV. It was like a reality TV show that I was starring in. It was not very entertaining. And it was kind of a stupid idea, to be honest. But eventually we turned it into a live streaming platform. And then that put us in the position where we could discover Twitch as a use case. And, it's not something that you would, also very counterintuitive, right? You wouldn't think that would be a thing before you heard about it. And then we were able to, 8 years later, we had a company that was valuable. We ended up selling to Amazon. And so, cannabis is the same thing where people were working in the space and building the space before it was legal, before it was mainstream for a long time. And I think that those people now, only now in the last couple of years, are you starting to see these multi-billion-dollar cannabis companies and really amazing financial outcomes. And so to me, as an entrepreneur, the key is to just get in the game, start iterating, talk to customers, make sure you're building something that people really like. And then if you keep doing that, eventually you'll build something of value.
Yeah, and I think doing something that you like too, right? You just had a company, Atrium, that you were doing, and you were gung-ho on that, and then transitioned into, shut that down, and now moving into more wellness, right?
Well, that's a good example. That's a good example, because I didn't really
you did everything right too.
I started that business for very mercenary reasons, right? I was very ego-driven. I want to make more money. I want to be build a bigger company or whatever. And through that process, I really realized, it's not something that you really truly care about. That's like really resonates with you. Then you're not going to stick it through when things are difficult. So I think startups are so important. It's so important to have that intrinsic motivation for success, right? Because you want to see something appear in the world, as however you think it should be, and you have this like product that you want to bring to market for yourself, right? That's like the most important thing, is that's what it's going to propel you when things are hard, which they often will be as an entrepreneur. I'm sure every entrepreneur here has experienced that. It's really important to just keep to find something that you really resonate with and you're truly passionate about. Otherwise, you're not going to stick with it when things are terrible.
Yeah. And, from that, do you see any trends when you evaluate entrepreneurs and sort of when they're trying to build something sustainable, or anything that, a pattern that stands out?
Founders, I'm, as an investor, you're looking for founders who have that killer instinct and they want to bring this vision to market by hook or by crook. They're going to do whatever it takes to make it work, right? Those are the people you want to back. And people are going to run through walls to solve any problem. They're going to, they're just going to figure it out, whatever it is. One example, I invested in this company called Alto, which is a pharmacy company in a highly regulated space, right? It's pharmacy. And there were lots of trouble. We had many times when we were having trouble getting licenses in California, or dealing with regulatory. And every time the founders, Matt and Jamie, they were very dynamic, and they just figured it out, whether they had to like find the right lobbyist, right? Or like prepare the whole company for an audit in like 24 hours, whatever it was. They just hustled to kind of run through walls. And that is when, when you see that in a founder, that's when you really are like, that's the guy I want to back. They might not make it this time. They might not, there's a lot of extrinsic luck factors or whatever to whether you're successful, but that's the type of person that you really want to be in business with and support.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard journey to start up, or to starting a company, or pouring yourself into it. And it's just like marathon pace that you have to kind of go into, but with sprints, sometimes long sprints put in. Yeah, how do you balance productivity and with self-care and rest? How do you avoid burnout? What are things that you've seen other founders do that can help sort of, give you energy to sustain over the long run?
That's a good question. So, I really think of entrepreneurship as a creative act. Entrepreneurship is your expression of some change, product, whatever you want to see in the world. And I think it's really important that oftentimes people end up in places where they start off creating something, right? Like a product, a software product, or like a brand, a company, like a branded product, or like, whatever they want to bring to market. And then as the company scales and grows, they end up being more of an administrator. So they end up doing a bunch of stuff that they might be good at. Like maybe in order to get the product to market, they had to like build a sales team, or they had to like, they hired a ton of people. So now they're running like this company that's a couple hundred people and doing a lot of management. And they might be doing a bunch of things that they're good at and they're competent at, but that doesn't give them joy, right? That's not their higher purpose. So as an entrepreneur, I think you really want to constantly think about like, how do I live in my zone of genius? The things that, I'm good at, that actually are, that I'm good at and I love doing, right? And that give me energy, not just the things that you're good at, but maybe take away energy, which I think is where most successful founders end up. And then they get burned out because they don't enjoy what they're doing every day. So to me, that's like one of the most important things. And obviously, startups are a long journey, right? You've been at it for 6 years now, right? So it's a long time.
6 years. Let's go.
You got to figure out how you can sustain yourself during that time in what's a very stressful, emotional roller coaster. So, that could be many different things for different people. For me, regular exercise is really important. Meditation is really important. A gratitude journal to remind myself, to be grateful is really important, to build that practice. It could be, there's lots of different ways to kind of rebalance yourself, but I think it's really important that you prioritize self-care, because it's not something that's going to be over in a very short period of time.
makes a lot of sense. When you're thinking about investing, right? You're looking for big outcomes. You look at, a lot of times it isn't necessarily the revenue today, it's the potential of tomorrow. We're witnessing some of the biggest changes right now in history and everything. Different industries are booming, other industries are gone. What potential do you see in the cannabis industry against the backdrop of all the other things that are kind of happening in the world?
Well, I kind of assume there's a lot of growth in the cannabis market right now, to be honest. So, I could see that for both in-store and brands, but also like the delivery, of course, living in the COVID times. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I might flip that question back on you. What do you think the opportunity is?
I mean, I think a lot about sort of that, like my dream scenario is like hanging out in Tokyo in like a lounge and smoking some kush from California and like eating ramen. Like that's where I put myself and where I want to be with like Hazel and Steph and like,
I want to be there with you.
Yeah. Like that's where I would think it's, we have this mentality, like this thing is just only going to get bigger. And there's just like, we need qualified and well-intentioned people on moving this thing as a positive force for good. I also think like California or cannabis in general is that tip of the spear for lots of other plant medicines coming. So I think there's going to be an awakening of other substances and products that you can engage with and get that healing. So I don't know. Those are things I kind of put myself in that I like to be experiencing while I'm doing this that keep me energized.
That's exciting.
Yeah. How do you decide where to invest your time and energy?
That's a good question.
Besides fasting for 4 days, 5 days.
I've got 8 hours left.
8 hours.
I haven't eaten in 112 hours. So I've been, it's interesting. It's a good experience. I encourage everyone to do it at least once. It's my mind's on food. My wife like opened some food, like 30 feet away from me, and I could smell it. But back to your question, like, what do I put my energy into? I think that's evolved over time. For me, I've always been like a creative person who I just get excited about new ideas. So I'm like, I want to dive into them, whatever they are. And so it could be anything, right? It could be a legal startup like Atrium was. It could be a video streaming startup. I just love new ideas, and I love to learn about new industries and meet people. And so a lot of my times my startups have come out of, or startups I've either created or invested in, have come out of just the random coincidences of meeting people and being, liking them and saying, hey, I want to learn about this industry and I want to do something with this person. So, with my new fund, Go Capital, started with my friend Robin, who's, a very great investor. He's a much better investor than I am. Actually invested in like Uber and Square and Twitter. And we just wanted to hang out together. We wanted an excuse to spend time together. So that was the whole kind of impetus for the fund. And then in terms of what companies we invest in, it could be anything. I mean, we're really looking for things that obviously can have a big impact on the world and like be a big company. And so, so far we've invested in things like healthcare, e-commerce, and like decarbonization. And one in a coffee company actually. So I don't know, there's coffee's a big industry. But it could be anything. We're really open to learning. I love learning about new spaces and new ideas.
Well, I guess that's a great question or segue. Like, how do you choose your co-founders? I mean, you kind of your co-founders at Justin TV, I would say, became like an all-star group. And then you also had co-founders in Atrium that kind of was in a different direction. What learnings do you have?
It's very nice of you to say.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it, but co-founders are so important, and who you start that journey with. And you've seen a lot of breakups.
Yeah, one of the things that's really, really important when you're founding a company. I mean, people say over time. They often say it's like getting married, right? Like you have to be prepared to spend a lot of time with this person for a long, long period of time, years or decades even. And I think it's really important to have values alignment. That's I think the most important thing. And just, your values are not necessarily the right ones, right? People have different values and it's okay. Like one example might be you think it's important to spend face time in the office. The other person might think it's better to like just work, when you can, when you want to, and your productivity is most important. And there's not really a right or wrong there. It's just like two different values. And so I think when people get into conflict, it's when they have values misalignment. So I think it's really, really important to spend time with the people and, make sure that you do trial working with them, to make sure that you have values alignment, because that's what's going to keep you from getting the conflict in the long run. And the times when I've had the best working relationships with co-founders is when we had aligned values. And the times when I've had problems or had co-founder breakups, it's times when we just didn't have aligned values.
Yeah, that's good. This question's coming from one of our YC brethren from Ted at Flower Co. You've raised millions and millions of dollars. You've helped founders raise millions of dollars. Atrium raised hundreds of millions of dollars for
$75 million.
$75 million. Sorry, I embellished. Still a lot of money. Could you give me advice on how you successfully raise that capital during those periods where venture is being less active, especially, or even in this environment now where funding has changed? Like, what makes a good idea investing? What's those dynamics that we should be looking out for?
Yeah. So look, the funding market is going to change. It's a very fashionable market, right? Like venture capitalists chase hot areas and then a new area becomes hot and the old area isn't hot. And that's the times and you don't control that. That's an external circumstance, right? So you can't really obsess over that because good entrepreneurs they're going to build in their space, whatever they care about, whatever it is they care about. And then the funding market will grow around them or will not, right? And so, cannabis was hot in 2018 or something like that, 2018, yeah. Because there's this legalization wave. And then there were some really big outcomes. And now maybe it's not so hot because that's just fashion, right? And so yeah. I think what you need to do as an entrepreneur is really tell a story. Whatever amount of money you're raising, you could be raising $100,000, you could be raising $1 million, you could be raising $100 million. But what people invest in is stories, right? Stories are what drive us as human beings. That's like how we connect with each other. And so a lot of times people think about it as like, I have to make it, it's like about, like why they don't understand. Why do people connect with what I'm doing? I have a great business, but people don't connect with it. Well, the answer is almost inevitably because you're not telling a story that's a compelling story. So what's a compelling story? I would break it down into 3 parts. So every story in humanity, not just pitches or stories about companies, follows 3 acts, right? One is the world was a certain way. Act 2 is something changes. And then act 3 is the world is a new way now. And so a narrative about a company is the same thing. It's like the market exists in a certain way and, there's a problem. Here's our solution and what we're doing. And here's why, like how it's working. What's the evidence it's working? So that could be a story of traction or how amazing the product is or whatever it is. And I found when you focus on that narrative and building something that's really, really truly compelling, and you can practice that, you can test it on people, you can tell people that story and see if they resonate with it. That's when fundraising really unlocks for people. And the story is the whole package. It's not just what you're doing, right? It's also your product, your company, you, the founder, you're really selling yourself and how that all fits together. That's super, super important.
Yeah. And, you're launching a podcast called The Quest, which is founders, groups, people that you've been interested with sharing their stories. What have you learned about these topics of the years of being an investor or founder or human that you're hoping to share in that endeavor?
Yeah, that's a great question because so I'm launching this podcast and the podcast really is about the stories of people who, oftentimes very successful people, and people look on from the outside and they say, oh, that guy's got it all. He's great. He's doing well, but they're not seeing maybe the journey through life that they've gotten to get there and that they continue to go through. So I want to create a podcast where I talk to people about their journey, and oftentimes some of the people who are the most successful are the most tortured, or have been through the biggest roller coaster, or have fought depression, or have, like had some really big setbacks in their career, even while they're like doing well, from the outside, well, it looks like they're doing well. And so that's really what the podcast is about. It's really to kind of bring that inside story and bring people the knowledge that, we're all human beings. We all go through struggles. Every person experiences 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows in their life. And I just really wanted to bring that to light because I think for me, when I was coming up as a new entrepreneur, and for the first long time in my career, like maybe 15 years of my career, I always looked at other people who were more successful than me. I was like, that person has it all. I wish I was that person. I wish I was doing as good as them, or I should be doing differently. And you don't realize that every person is fighting their own secret battle. There's no really basis for comparison. And when you see under the covers and you see that everybody struggles, everybody has difficulties, for me, the result was that I was so much more comfortable in my own experience. And I could accept, this is my experience, this is who I am. And I didn't want for something else, So that's my goal with the podcast.
That's awesome. And then this is kind of last question. This is an app that I've been using that you're actually working on too. It's called Kin. You've been using it to build good habits, using it to share habits with other people. I'd love to hear just sort of you're building something you wanted essentially to help you build good habits and mindfulness. Can you just kind of walk through that and kind of where you think you're going to go with it?
Absolutely. So, this is a great example of really finding your purpose, right? Because previously, I think I worked on a lot of ideas that I thought could make money, but maybe I wasn't the user of. I wasn't someone who really loved it. It wasn't for me. And now, I'm working on this idea. It's called Kin. It's a app you can get in the App Store on Android. It's at kinapp.co. And I was really excited about this idea because I had used this habit tracker, which is if you're not familiar, it's a type of app that lets just mark down every day you do a habit you want to do. Like, let's say meditate. You just press this button and then it makes a streak. So the goal is to create the longest streak possible. And it's a way of creating a positive reinforcement loop on your habit. And habit trackers were really instrumental for me. When I was going through a period of great stress a couple of years ago with my company, I started meditating and I started working out every day and I started doing a gratitude journal every day. And those things really helped me. And I was, it was weird because it was hard for me to adopt new habits. I didn't think I was the type of person that could adopt new habits. And what really helped me was this almost trick. It's like a mind hack, right? We're saying, okay, I'm just going to do this thing every day and I'm going to check it off and I'm just going to make the longest streak possible. So that worked for me really well. And there's a lot of habit apps like that. But there wasn't something that let me share that with friends and kind of come together around a shared habit. So for example, I have a group of friends and we try to exercise every day. And, I when I check off this habit thing, it's my own experience, but it's not pushed out to them. So we created a social habit tracker it's called Kin. And some friends and I just created it. One of my brothers worked on it with me. And then, it's been launched in the App Store for a couple of months. And we haven't really talked about it. We don't talk about it publicly because it's really just for ourselves. But, now people are using it. They seem to like it. So, if you're struggling with building a positive habit in your life, I encourage you to try to check it out.
I just posted it.
Yeah.
I just posted in the chat. So if anyone wants to build any good habits, I've been using it to help me do 60 days of meditation for an hour a day. And I've been using it to get to sleep early. I smoke weed every day. So,
you don't need a reminder.
makes me happy. But hey, this was great, Justin. Thanks for sharing. Really appreciate you, man. Have a wonderful day. Feel free to hang out. Your knowledge and wisdom, has helped me get through a lot of things. I'm glad you can share it with the broader community here.
Yeah, that's very kind of. I love you. I'll see you soon, brother.
Yeah, I love you too, bro.